The next team up is the Brooklyn Nets. They are definitively buyers, and I think their biggest need, like for me, my biggest question for them is, can they add size and versatility to the front line? And also, will they part with a first round pick given their long term uncertainty? That's like kind of not a huge deal because they don't have a bunch of first round picks to trade, but it was just something more so of me wondering how aggressive will they be buying, knowing that Kyrie's a free agent, wants an extension, but do you want to extend him? Then if you don't extend him, is Kevin Durant going to want to leave? What the fuck is Ben Simmons at this point? So there's still just a lot of uncertainty where it's okay if you could be opportunistic and get a big on the buyout market or just this cheap big. Sure, I think that you could probably work out something, but I'm just like, this team is good enough at full strength to be more aggressive than that. The question is, will they be? Or they won't even drum up their tax bill even further when, as of this recording, they are $34.6 million into the luxury tax, which is quite a bit of money. The other thing I'm wondering is just like, you have Patty Mills, Joe Harris, Seth Curry. Do one of those guys just get moved? Like, I don't think you want Patty Mills' money on your books next season. Joe Harris has been shooting the ball better, but he's still playing like fewer minutes than Seth Curry, who is going to be Seth Curry will be a free agent. Joe Harris is owed like 19 million or whatever next year. So could we kind of see them try to break up that, especially if you are going to bring back Kyrie Irving, because then you're just sort of this guard overload. And even Royce O'Neal is this smaller wing defender. But I think the priority might just be keeping the roster intact for now. And how do we go about, if I'm the Nets, getting a big to add, like, who hits their free throws? Because you're not going to have that in Ben Simmons. You're not going to have that in Nick Claxton at the moment. And I've also just kind of wondered, would you, and we'll get to this in a different trade deadline, like, would you, if you could just get out of Ben Simmons' contract, would you do that at this point? He brings a ton of value defensively, but just like the offensive value, yeah, the passing, okay, fine. But it's just like, it's not there. He is so low volume and just such a non-threat right now.
Yeah, I was recently having the thought of, you hear a lot now that, I'm trying to think what the examples used to be, like Blake Griffin's old contract or several that are Russell Westbrook now still, or a couple of years ago. They're just, the idea that there just aren't a lot of really bad contracts in the NBA anymore. And it's gotten harder to sort of name the, handful of just, this Tobias Harris probably was in that group a couple years ago when there was more left on that deal. Klay Thompson's, guys like that. There just aren't like really awful ones. So I was wondering, is Ben Simmons the worst contract in the league right now, especially just for a good team where you're saying like the Nets are, and you've seen his playoff track record and he has all these deficiencies that, like, yeah, he's going to help your defense and playmaking and transition stuff in the regular season. But during the playoffs, like, does he have any value? Like maybe in the first round, I guess, but for all that money, and this is a contending team, he might just be a total zero. It might be a zero in the postseason. So that was kind of the thought of it. So he's obviously the hardest player to trade. But yeah, I think this is the rare exception, just zooming back out of where, this team is looking for a backup bigs. It's like, no, they really do need a backup big. And that's especially if Simmons is going to be limited or not a factor in the playoffs. Cause then you're just talking, yeah, like Nick Claxton's awesome, super underrated, great switch defender, shot blocker, free throws, as you mentioned, are an issue. But then after him, it's like, you're not playing Daron Sharp in minutes that matter. So Kevin Durant is going to play some center, you're just going to, I don't know what your options are relative to like playoff level competition. So a backup big should be a priority. I think ideally you want someone that can space, because then that makes it a little easier to have Simmons out there. Because that's, it works fine because Claxton's so good at everything else when those two play together now. But I think if your backup big is going to spend time with Simmons, you certainly need someone that can shoot it. So, good luck. That's not always that easy to find, especially if basically you're dangling Patty Mills as we could totally get rid of this guy. But yeah, it's tricky. But this is the team that needs another big, even though we've said that the last handful have all been targeting that.
The trade I had for them was widely hated by Nets fans, and it's the Nets get Zach Collins and Josh Richardson, who I will say, I don't like playing this card, but if you're saying that these guys suck, you just haven't been paying attention to what's happening. They both had really good seasons for San Antonio. If you don't want to do this trade, I think it's arguable, but they've been good. The Spurs get Joe Harris, Patty Mills, and then Philly's 2027 first. maybe that cost is too high to do that. One I had bandied about. So curious first, before we go to my next iteration of it, what are your thoughts on something like that? Is the 2027 first too much to like? Does that view like I guess Joe Harris's money next year? Am I skewing too negative on that? But like
Well,
the Patty Mills money is a negative. Someone on Twitter told me like, well, the Spurs review Patty Mills as an asset because he's been there before, and I was like, that's actually not how that works. Just like how Jazz fans were getting on me, like, no, Hill and Grayson Allen in a fake trade I had, they would never go back to Utah. It's a different regime, and I promise you, teams are not thinking that way when they're looking at the meat and potatoes of a deal. They will
yeah.
reroute them later. Like they're not because you didn't like them or you think their team cancers just off limits, especially in a case like Utah where the entire regime has turned over since the two of them were there.
Yeah, so I think actually what you believe about Harris's value on that contract is kind of the defining factor for this trade. Is 19 almost 20 million next year for a guy who, like he's had just a brutal injury, last couple of years, really only played 14 games last year. And when he's healthy, he shoots the shit out of it. And even in a down year, he's like a tick under 30, under 40% from deep. But like, this is pretty clearly Harris's worst year since what, like, I don't know, 2016, 17, when he
Yeah.
basically became a regular NBA rotation guy. And the trend line is not super great for him. So if you think that deal is not something you want on the books, and again, we've talked about sometimes it's valuable to have an expiring big contract because you can use that to bring back a big player, especially if you don't care about the tax like Brooklyn doesn't. Um, I think that could make some sense. And I'm with you, like, you know, Collins has been and Richardson really are just toiling in obscurity, and you can throw question marks at what their numbers mean given that their team is terrible and nobody takes the Spurs seriously. But like those guys would play, and Collins is exactly the type of big I was talking about. He's been a stretch guy in the past, or at least a theoretical one. He can move a little bit. Makes a lot of sense as a backup big. And Richardson is just, I mean, Richardson's like a plug and play seventh, eighth guy literally anywhere, and maybe better than that if he's got a little bit of that Miami juice left still from a few years ago. So giving up that first is a little scary because like who knows what the Sixers are going to be in 2-3 years. But yeah, I think that's something. I don't mind giving up Harris, I guess, is the bottom line, to circle all the way back. I think they have enough shooting, the Nets do, from other reserve guard and wing positions that it might be okay. You might not suffer too much if you have to give him up as like the main salary piece here.
My guess would be that San Antonio doesn't do seconds and Joe Harris alone for Collins and Richardson. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I imagine they think they can get like a bad first for Richardson still, or like a fake first, which may just be optics, but a couple seconds, I'm not sure you get there.
For both of them, anyway. I think maybe one
Yeah.
of them would be possible. The other one, though, I thought about sort of like a challenge trade: Ben Simmons for Zach Collins, Josh Richardson, and Doug McDermott. Like San Antonio just says, we're gonna be the team that reboots Ben Simmons.
So
They're not gonna need to spend money in free agency anytime soon.
of all the teams, so that's the only kind of team I think Ben Simmons makes sense for, where you've got the cap space, you have the luxury of, we can take like a whole other year going forward and see if this guy has anything. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I just it's really hard to imagine Ben
Trading
Simmons
James
a great
Harden for what
guy.
amounts to Josh Richardson, Zach Collins, and Doug McDermott.
Congratulations, you traded Ben Simmons though. I didn't think it could be done.